Hello and welcome to the EFN Presents review of the My Little Pony comic issue 3, part 3 of the return of Queen Chrysalis. As always guys, I will be covering the whole comic here, so if you haven't had a chance to read it yet, go and check it out and then head on back. Cover A for this issue is by Amy Meberson and prominently features Chrysalis with 5 changelings over her shoulders, sporting the manes of the main 6 minus Twilight. Far and away, this is the best of the non-exclusive covers for this story arc so far. The art style and the shading used is reminiscent of the covers from issue 1, with very attractive shading and detail that works perfectly as eye-grabbing cover art. But while the issue 1 covers didn't have any strong focus, opting to show us a larger scene overall, this cover presents one strong visual. While it doesn't show us anything that happens in the issue, the strong contrast between the almost silhouetted changelings against their eyes and fangs, coupled with the vibrant colors of the manes, definitely grabs your eyes, and seeing the main 6 as changelings will certainly grab your attention as well, more than any scene from the comic itself could. That said, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's trying to trick the reader into promising more from this issue than actually happens. It's a great cover and one that this series definitely deserves. With our heroes being split up at the end of the last chapter, this issue is actually comprised of 4 different stories detailing the travel of the 3 pairs of ponies through the forest on their way to the Changeling Kingdom. The 4th story is told from the perspective of Queen Chrysalis, monitoring the ponies' progress through her crystal ball as well as from reports from her changeling forces. Having the main 6's stories be experienced as they're relayed to Chrysalis is a clever way to keep her in the story, as well as to keep the changelings relevant. While they served their purpose in issue 2 in breaking the team apart, Chrysalis's plan is on cruise control in this issue, leaving the changelings with little to do. Unfortunately, this means that aside from revealing Chrysalis's plan to the reader in the comic's opening, she and her changelings are mostly relegated to just laughing at the main 6's misfortunes and groaning at the CMC's antics. Definitely not the role you'd think they have given the cover for this issue. So, putting the changelings aside for now, what fate befalls the ponies in this issue? The 3 groups are comprised of Twilight and Fluttershy, Rainbow Dash and Pinkie Pie, and Applejack and Rarity. With only 2 characters in each scene, their individual personalities and how they play off each other play a predominant role in shaping how these scenes play out. For this reason, I think it's no surprise how the groups are formed. The Applejack Rarity pairing in particular is straight out of the episode Look Before You Sleep, which I can't help but be reminded of during the intro scene where they're sitting down to dinner. One other fact to note about this pair is that they both have sisters they're trying to save. However, this only comes up in passing, with Applejack trying to remind Rarity of the fact when Rarity gets distracted by the forest's giant flowers. That in particular sticks out as odd because Rarity is the one in the last issue who brings up the deadline and how they need to save their sisters. I can forgive that because the distraction of the flowers aesthetic is somewhat in character for Rarity, but there's a number of events in this issue where the characters almost start to become parodies of themselves, with their personal traits just being a little too exaggerated. I don't recall any of the other pairings really having an episode that focused solely on them, but the Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash pairing has definitely been utilized before in such episodes as Griffin the Brush-Off and Party of One. Each of the side stories follows a similar arc, with the first scene just showing the pair generally miserable and expressing concern or suspicion for the situation. In the second, the characters end up in over their heads being chased by one of the forest's creatures. And finally, the group runs into each other, the conflicts resolve in an unexpected fashion, and the group reunites as we prepare for the final chapter. Though they all end up in over their heads, this, strangely enough, isn't the driving force making them realize they shouldn't have split up. And they largely come to that conclusion before the action even starts to take place. Both approaches have their own merit and reinforce different aspects of why the group need each other and why splitting up was a dumb move. But given the friendship between the characters, it's good to see that physical safety is not the only motivator for the reconciliation. How each character changes their mind is disappointingly brief, but carried off believably enough, with each character's reasons fitting their personality. Fluttershy is genuinely concerned for their friend's well-being, Twilight gets swayed by Fluttershy's rational argument, and Dash realizes that she's too awesome for her friends to say anything bad about her. It's a shame that so much of the time spent with Chrysalis is simply spent laughing at the main 6 or arguing with the CMC during the transition between the main storylines. Even the changelings in those scenes barely get any dialogue, which doesn't go much beyond "we have a report," and we see them get some good speaking lines early on. Despite this, and her own subplot only taking up 3 pages at the beginning of the issue and another page halfway through, we learn more about Chrysalis's character here than anywhere else. The issue opens up on the events immediately after the Season 2 finale, with the changelings crash landing in Wovey-Dovey Smoochy Land, unable to launch another attack, instead having to regroup. Oh no. Chrysalis points out that they could, oh Jesus, feast on the inhabitants of Wovey-Dovey Smoochy Land. Okay, Katie? I absolutely adore your writing, and the Chrysalis story is great, but...
You're starting to creep me out. So, anyway...
No, you know what? Let's get some closure here. Naturally, this scene came up during the comic panel at BronyCon.
So, what did you guys think of our Return of Chrysalis?
Since I know one of you is gonna ask it, the cute citizens of Wovey-Dovey Smoochy Land don't die.
They just go to live on a farm.
Upstate.
A rock farm.
With that Labrador retriever from the 3rd grade that your parents said is at your aunt's house.
Right. And you're...
I think we've officially arrived at the nexus of dark comedy for this story. So, moving on, quickly, one of Chrysalis's guys with hats talks with her about another attack on Celestia, but Chrysalis lays out her plans for revenge on Twilight Sparkle. Throughout these issues, and even as we see her right after the defeat at Canterlot, Chrysalis has the support of her followers. And not Adam West Batman villain-esque bumbling henchmen, but soldiers, loyal and competent. This following really sets Chrysalis apart from the other villains in the show, and shows that Chrysalis isn't some sort of wily coyote character. What happened in Canterlot was a fluke. She underestimated Twilight, but now she has Twilight firmly in her sights. You have to love a villain that can hold the upper hand simply by waiting for her plans to unfold. Though we've been teased with details of Chrysalis's plan from the start, and Twilight homes in on the comet's significance right in issue 1, we see just how effective Chrysalis has been playing the main 6 and knowing exactly how they'd react, and that the past 3 issues have been nothing but the heroes falling deeper into her trap. Since we were aware of parts of Chrysalis's plan all along, the fates of the main 6 don't come as much of a shock, and we've known from the outset that the CMC are basically nothing but bait. If issue 2 had tried to pass off the changelings as genuinely trying to stop Twilight and her friends, and Chrysalis had stayed tighter-lipped about her end goals, they really could have flipped things on their head for the reader here. To find out that Twilight and her friends were meant to make it all along, and that breaking them up wasn't intended to stop them, but to take advantage of their feelings for each other, takes away every win the characters have made, and would confront the reader with the horror that they've been slowly losing every step of the way. A reveal like that would have been the perfect way to end this issue, setting up the reader for the expectation of, I can't wait to see Twilight and her friends kick Chrysalis's butt, and delivering a very dire situation the characters are completely unaware of. This was not quite the issue I was expecting, but it's a strong issue overall. It's an issue about the main 6 being split up in the forest and reuniting, and yeah, it accomplishes that. I do wish more time had been spent on the characters repairing their relationships though. Chrysalis's side story is exceptional, revealing more about her character and reinforcing her threat to the main 6, while not confronting them directly. Though I'm not a fan of the parts where she just laughs at the main 6, okay, maybe a bit, but the comic doesn't need a laugh track. Not giving the changelings a bigger role in this story does give more time for the main 6 and their interactions, and it makes the issue feel more focused despite all the action that's taking place. Also, knowing Chrysalis's plan at this point, the changelings don't really need to intervene either, but simply keep tabs for her, so their absence is more consistent with the overall story as well. In this issue, most of the danger comes from something innocuous to the characters, simply because they're unfamiliar with their surroundings, so they don't recognize it. I suppose there's a life lesson in there somewhere. The visual gags and references in this issue are top-notch, only occasionally sticking out as intrusive, but generally fitting well with the story. Also refreshing is that rather than just hammer us with new jokes all the time, the comic actually takes advantage of some elements set up earlier, with the reappearance of Pinky's costumes and the Changeling's constant use of the adorable citizens of Wovey-Dovey Smoochy Land. And they even bring up the Sweetie Belle dictionary reference used way back in the first issue. Recurring jokes aren't overused and become almost more effective in the later occurrences, since it establishes them not only as random events, but a persistent element in the world, hilariously out of place, but accepted, at least by some, as perfectly natural. This issue features a lot of new characters, which is to be expected given how far we've traveled from any location seen in the show. Being exotic, it's hard to pin something as being out of place, so there was a lot of creative freedom in this issue, and it's fully utilized to create some very exciting encounters. Sadly, given their remoteness, this may also be the last time we see any of these creatures. As well as new characters, this issue features a wide variety of new locales, including pre- and post-changeling Wovey-Dovey Smoochy Land, Chrysalis's castle, and the many unique locations of the forest, keeping the comic fresh and vibrant despite the similar nature of the main six's individual stories. Possibly noteworthy is the palette choices for each of the main six's introductions, complementing the colors of each pairing. For Twilight and Fluttershy, there's the growing night sky paired with the warm hues of the fire. For Applejack and Rarity, we have the strong purple backgrounds coupled with the orange-brown of the leaves and ground. And in Pinky and Rainbow scene, it's pink and blue, blue, and pink, everything's blue and pink. On top of that, there's a nice transition through the issue between nighttime at the outset and daytime at the conclusion, going beyond merely conveying the passage of time, which is important given the timing of Chrysalis's plan. It's some nice symbolism mirroring the transitions of the characters between when they're separated and lost to reunited and strong. Either way, this issue features the best work we've seen so far in this series from colorist Heather Breckel, and the issue owes so much to it. One nitpick though, in Twilight's map of the paths through the forest, they're all painted like rivers. I know it's unforgivable, it's totally ruined the issue for me. Considering the endings of the previous comics and what this issue leads up to, I felt that leaving off on the Chrysalis gag was a little weak by comparison. But overall, this issue delivers a much stronger or at least focused story. While a more dramatic ending could have set the stakes or tone for the coming issue, we know what's coming and we know it's going to be great. What surprises does Chrysalis have in store for our heroes? What surprises does Pinky have in store now that she's exhausted her costume supply? Why haven't the CMC ever tried to escape? Does anyone still write letters to Celestia? We'll find out in issue 4 with the exciting climax to the return of Queen Chrysalis. See you next time.